Oh howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some PathOfExile discussion. Welcome to my plans for patch 3.24 League Start. What we're going to start with here is my Atlas plan, because actually your Atlas plan dictates the builds you can play. And I'm going to be going with a destructive play oriented Atlas. I do think it's worth mentioning that I'm going to miss days 1 and 2 of the league due to pre-existing commitments. If I was able to play days 1 and 2, I would be more inclined to push towards Expedition, because Expedition and ROG are ridiculously good on days 1, 2 and 3 of a league. But by the time that I'm level 90, it'll probably be day 4, and at that point, I'm not necessarily going to be able to get full benefit out of ROG. ROG really is all about getting that early currency. If you're familiar with ROG already, you will make a lot of wealth if you just mass produce items that are good enough to use, but also not necessarily so good that people don't aspire to replace them later. All of that out of the way, let's talk about what we're actually going with here. So firstly, how do you get your Atlas started? Well, that's going to be a heavy focus on Kirac missions now. There are a couple of other ways you can go about it, but Kirac missions and upping the tiers of maps that drop seems to me to be the best one after all of the changes that have taken place to the map duplication nodes. So basically, this is looking like the first 40 points that I would allocate. And this doesn't need to be in any particular order, but basically everything on this is dedicated to getting you more of the Atlas unlocked. From there, you respec later, or you use your second Atlas slot for something else. That's the road we're taking to get there. Let's talk about where we're going. The key to this strategy is that we want to amp up the final map boss in maps as much as possible, and that involves allocating nodes like Remnants of the Past. So we have Remnants of the Past to get us Shaper and Elder Atlas mini-boss maps. We also have the Synthesis equivalent to get Synthesis Atlas mini-boss maps, and we've got the Conqueror's version of it as well. We're going to be trying to farm a lot of these maps, and so this means we want to get to tier 14 maps reasonably promptly. As well as this, we also have a few other synergies with the final map boss in a zone, 25% chance to get a Scarab, and also we have this little juicy one, 5% chance to drop an additional connected map. All these are going to be very useful to us once we allocate Destructive Play. Destructive Play causes the Maven to cast up the stakes. This will summon 1 to 3 additional bosses when you're witnessing a map boss. Now the number of additional bosses is higher, and I'm interpreting this to mean that it biases towards 3 if you've mostly cleared the entire map. And then all of those Atlas bonuses to the final map boss in the area also apply to these summoned bosses. But there's a little bit more that we can do as well, and that is found in the Domination Scarabs. There is a really interesting Scarab here with the text, "Shrines in area are guarded by an additional map boss, and modifiers to the final map boss also apply to these Guardians." So we're going to get maximum benefit from that because we're already amping up the rewards from each map boss that we kill. Well, we have all of the useful modifiers to the final map boss, with the exception of the super sketchy one that we'll probably spec into later once the character is powerful enough, and that is Thorough Exploration. So we're not taking Thorough Exploration early, but when the character is super powerful, yep, that's something we might well do. How do you boost the Domination Scarab of Terrors? Well, you throw in 2, or when you're available 3, of these regular Domination Scarabs. Now I do think that these Scarabs that have a Winged Scarab art, these are going to potentially be quite rare, and it may well be that we can't always do this strategy, that we're just not able to sustain Domination Scarab of Terrors even with trade. If that's the case, that's fine. We can just drop that off for a little while and use one of the other Scarabs related to Shrines instead. They're all pretty good. So we mentioned Shrines. Why do we want to use Shrines? Well, Shrines make you go faster, especially in conjunction with a Syncretism, which causes shrines in your maps to grant you an additional shrine effect. You'll find a shrine in every area because of Supplication, you'll often find more. And once you have access to Domination Scarabs, you'll find even more than that. And this will often speed you up when you're going through maps and make your character more powerful. Additionally, if you can source the unique helmet, the Gull, which is fairly rare these days, that's going to be an additional boost on top of this. One thing that might appear quite interesting is that we're deliberately missing one of these Domination Shrine nodes. So we're taking all the small nodes here that give a 20% chance to get an extra shrine, but we are not taking All That Glitters, the notable in that cluster. And the reason for that is that All That Glitters makes your maps harder. It is something you will eventually pick up because Covetous Shrines are a big boost to loot, but this comes at the expense of getting extra power instead, and it also causes you to take additional damage. So there's a very real drawback to that as well. Finally, we have a few Delve nodes as well. The benefits of the Delve nodes are that once you've got a good chance to contain Nico in an area, Packed with Energy is also something that will make you more powerful and make you faster. This is more of an early endgame Atlas. We can always respec out of this later once the character is powerful enough that we don't need that extra power. And at the point we do that respec, we'll definitely take Thorough Exploration as well. Finally, there's one more mechanic we've got that has no synergy with the Scarabs we'll be using, but it's something that's really simple and fast in maps, and that's Heist. We're going to be taking everything that boosts the number of Heist blueprints you get. There are really two ways that you can deal with Heist. You can either run the contracts yourself if you enjoy the content, or you can simply sell the contracts, the blueprints, and the like to other players, and there's been some trade quality of life improvements that's going to make that easier than it's been in the past. So that's the reason for all of the Heist shenanigans that you see on this Atlas passive tree. Finally, there's a couple of things that we're dedicating to Scarabs as well. We're taking Remarkable Relics to bias our Scarabs towards rarer varieties. I think this will be good. We'll have to find that out. It's not tested yet. We don't know how strong the bias is. And we're taking Chittering Champions, which causes the final map boss to drop 25% of a Scarab, except we're going to have a lot of final map bosses on every map that we run. So that's the Atlas. As for the build, I'm going to be going something very similar to what I ran in 3.22, which was a Chieftain build that was based at the time around Righteous Fire and Searing Bond. This time, we're going to be downplaying the Righteous Fire aspect. It's going to primarily become a Fire Trap build. It's actually a very, very similar build to what we played back in 3.22, but it will have some differences, and I do think it will be a bit stronger. There's been a couple of nerfs that do impact this build, but overall, I think it's in a very solid place, especially when we're going to be fighting a bunch of new bosses in this patch. So that's something I'm definitely looking forward to playing around with. I'll put some gameplay footage from 3.22 into the video now so that you can see the way that this played, but that was the Searing Bond version, and we'll be using Fire Trap instead. Fundamentally though, it is a fire damage over time build, and one that propagates damage incredibly well over the whole screen, while dealing serviceable but not extraordinary damage to single targets. I'll put a link down in the description of this below, down to that forum write-up, and also to videos that I made during patch 3.22 about the build as it was then. Anyways, that's my plans for 3.24 League Start. I will be missing the first couple of days as I said, but after that, that's what I'm going to be doing. May your Varlorbs have interesting results, and I'll see you around.